Hi, basically, Robert, this is an event where we've got 200 of the top scientists from around the world that are inventing drugs for the world, primarily focusing on cancer and heart disease and all of the critical ailments, Alzheimer's, diabetes. So what we're doing is we're making technologies that are really innovating and helping them make these discoveries. So Hopkinton, hopefully the growth will keep on coming. You can see there's a lot of excitement in the room. They like our new technologies.
The book actually goes through a lot of really neat innovations. I spent 10 years at DuPont running a Teflon business at one time, and we had a lot of really creative developments around Teflon, and my whole life has been dedicated to really break out disruptive technologies and then trying to see if we can commercialize them. Always surrounded by some really intelligent people that really knew what was going on, and tried, in this case, you know, they had this new glue that was invented, but nobody in 3M wanted it. And so one time a choir director sees the glue and says that some of the pages are falling when his musicians are changing pages, and says, I think I have a role for that, tries it out, and they create their own market from down inside of R&D basically. The chemist that was the choir director created that market for post. You know, that was the beginning, and it went crazy after that. Car crash simulation modeling. Another part of the book talks about adoption cycles. There's a lot of time spent on how hard it is for us to accept very new, innovative technologies to run experiments. The car crash simulation modeling started back in the 70s. And it took the automotive engineers close to 15 years before they would accept the results that came from it. The moment that they accepted it, the airbag was invented. A lot of the framework of the car, it wasn't intuitive through actual car crashes, that they would use dummies. They couldn't see some of the actual mechanics that occurred. The simulation modeling taught them different ways to create energy going around the dummy or around the human in the car. Net result is there's a 35% reduction in car fatalities the year after these new designs start to hit from car crash simulation modeling. In addition, there's a 90% reduction now of these simulated car crashes where they have the dummy in, very expensive. It can take 6 months to build the car. Those dummies cost, you know, a couple $100,000 just to run all the mechanics in it. They only run now 10% of what they used to, and fatalities are down 35%, and a lot of it is credited to the airbag and some of these innovations. But why did it take them 15 years to listen and adopt? The book goes through, as leaders, we all have to be on the lookout for new paradigms. And there's a lot of new paradigms. We see them every day. Sometimes they're great, and if you go with those paradigms, it can lead to some great things. Sometimes they're dead ends. If you go too far, your investors might say, get out of town. This is too much of a dead end. You got to make some money in return on these technologies, or we're not going to stay with you. So being on the lookout for paradigms, there's a lot of rules in the book on ways to train your brain as either a leader or a scientist to know which ones are the real ones versus the bad ones. And there's a lot of history that they go through to teach you. Those companies that can figure this out do prevail. Another great story is the Swiss watch industry. In 1970, they had 90% global share. Gerard Perjol developed the quartz crystal technology right in Switzerland, and he tried to sell it to the Swiss themselves. And they says, well, wait a minute, you don't have to wind that up if this doesn't make sense. So they were so sure that this technology made no sense, they didn't even patent it. And so that engineer went to Japan and was at a trade show, and he was showing the Japanese this particular technology. Of course, and Seiko took one look at it and said, that's the future. What was it that Seiko could see that the Swiss themselves, who own 90% of the worldwide market, couldn't see? Within a couple of years, the market was completely decimated. They lost 2/3, 90,000 employees went down to less than 30,000. 2/3 of the companies went bankrupt in Switzerland. So a whole country got decimated by our inability to see a paradigm that could have really been very productive. So you never know who's right. One of the rules they teach in one of the films that we really try to show all of our engineers, and DuPont showed to me when I first started, is a book and a movie by Joel Barker, Discovering the Future. And one of the things you're looking for are new people. New people and young people sometimes are on the edge, and they're thinking about things so differently. And so they train you to really make sure you cultivate a climate and an environment for innovation, where you really reach out. You're in that meeting, right? The new person speaks up. You as the leader, you can do two things. You can do the old eye roll with all of your people that are with you, like, what's this guy talking about or this woman talking about? Or you can embrace what they're saying and try to incorporate it and flow with it for a while. little things can change the course of a company, can change the course of your ability to get drugs to the market that's going to cure some of these very difficult diseases. So I am so enthralled by this, and our company is enthralled by these technologies and these approaches, and we're trying to adopt them as we think about what next generation technologies to invent for you. There's a lot that we're working on. There's a great book called Into Medicine that describes the environment where the doctors themselves are probably what's bottlenecking us from making any advances. The doctor that's putting the hammer to your knee and checking your reflexes when there's genomics and there's proteomics and there's all these new technologies that could be applied, sometimes the doctors themselves could actually be getting in the way. This book is a phenomenal book, talking about, in fact, there's a chapter dedicated in there from Caliper for the microfluidic chip, and there's also a chapter dedicated to Xenogen, which is the molecular imaging technology. Just coincidentally that we now have those both in the same house. This book actually Andy Kessler wrote about this early on, about these being disruptive technologies and can be applied in some very creative ways. So we're going to talk a little more about those in a moment, but the point is that the pharmaceutical industry, still, we have a long way to go. Co-loading, putting everybody together in one room, creating collective wisdom. Sometimes they say knowledge is fun, but imagination is just extraordinary. And you can't get to imagination sometimes when you have everybody thinking the same way. Diversity is one of the greatest things that I think America brings to the table. We have such a diverse workplace. We have folks from around the world that have all grown with different experiences in their lives. They look at things so different. We probably have one of the most diverse populations in the world, and that leads to imagination. So knowledge is great, but if you can get to imagination, that's where those big serendipitous breakthroughs come from. So we feel real encouraged by the collective wisdom process. And then the cost of experimentation, we've been hearing this from day one. How can we get this $1,000 genome? You know, we can't afford $100,000. We've had a lot of tests where you can see 4 different pancreatic cancer patients. If you spend $250,000 per patient, you can absolutely see the difference in their genetics of that cancer that they have, and probably create a regimen, a personalized regimen that makes sense. But who could possibly afford $250,000 per patient to allow that kind of personalized medicine to evolve? So enter Illumina, enter some of the next generation sequencing technology, PacBio. There's a lot of great new technologies that are on the way. And we're trying to connect with all of them as we're thinking about our GX to make sure we're preparing the right samples for that next generation. Can we get to a $1,000 genome and enable a whole different type of medicine? I think it's on the forefront. It's going to happen. It's just a question of when it's going to happen. Because later, so we all got to hurry up. There's a lot of young folks in the room, but the rest of us, we got to hurry up so we can impact our families and our own lives in this quest that we're on. So now, here's the book list that we really get excited about. And it's interesting, I've gotten the great fortune to have some really strategic relationships with certain customers. Pfizer, Amgen, Bristol Myers Squibb, GSK. I know I'm missing a few here, where we've gone to the board level. And I remember the first time I met John LaMattina from Pfizer, I started talking to him about some of these books. And he forced his whole senior leadership team to read The World is Flat. I think it's a phenomenal book. I told my daughter, who 4 years ago was entering Boston College, and Barack Obama was doing for freshmen. What's it called for freshmen? Orientation. Well, there's another name that they have. What? I can't think of the name for it. What is it? Convocation. So they started out, right? And Barack Obama comes, and my daughter's all fired up. And I was telling her for like a year, you got to read this book. I was pleading with her, you got to read. And sure enough, he's there for his book, right? And he lifts up a book, and he lifts up this book. My daughter texted me and said, "Dad, you were right." Well, this is great. But the book it just creates a whole different mindset. We look at what's going on with the movement of technology to China and India, how much of the world has now moved to the pharmaceutical industry to these testing centers. All of our multinationals are asking us routinely, can we move our GXs into their facilities, or have service providers in these locations to use the GX or use the Easy Reader because they want that standardization around the globe. It's happening. It's big.